Ec17, the sacred code of marriage. Soul to soul talk. The sacred code of marriage. Life guiding conversations with Morai Amoro and Jenai Summer. Morai, could you please talk about marriage? Because I see so many parents of my friends divorcing. And why do people divorce? Jenai, I will not go into the details of why people divorce, but I can speak about the sacred code of marriage. And when the two partners do not stick to the code, you can figure out for yourself why most likely divorce comes into play. When we would reflect the sacred code of marriage into all our other relationships, and by the way, we have a relationship with everybody and everything, we would have a common foundation in all our actions with ourselves, others, and everything. This sacred code, written, spoken, or unspoken, is a reflection of the guidance of the Creator and the laws of the universe and nature. There are, however, different levels, layers, and understanding of consciousness in the code. The experiences we will have in our marriage are reflections of our level of consciousness within the code. When the purpose of a marriage is, for example, security, escaping from loneliness, the norm expectations of our family tradition, for the sake of children, or the feeling that somebody belongs to us, or even for financial reasons, the reality that we will experience during that marriage will be limited to that only. There is much more inside the sacred code of marriage, such as the levels of purpose, commitment, the levels of love, the levels of contribution of service, and last but not least, spirituality. So it is our purpose that creates the foundation and will set the scene for the entire marriage. Sometimes some of us are lucky while going through marriage to find out about the deeper levels and the purpose of this union, and this helps us to go through all its phases and stages. So before anybody officially commits to each other and commits to the sacred code, let's look at some of the layers and levels of the code of marriage. Here is a simple example what happens in a business relationship between employee and employer. Let's look from the employee's point of view. When you take a job just for security, for the money, showing off your skills through ego, it will be a very limited experience of the business relationship. Problems will arise, such as not accepting the employer and fellow employees, the daily situations, screaming that the others need to change, complaining, constantly asking for more money, company benefits and free time, and most likely falling asleep and even cheating in many different ways. What about what we as employees bring to the table? Not just by hanging out at the business and rendering our skill, but as conscious human beings. It would change the entire experience because we would be able to deal with every situation. Service without expectation is one of the secrets of the code. We must also ask ourselves who the real owner of the business is and who is the real employee. This brings me to the next point. In order to understand the deeper layers of the code, we must first ask ourselves if this is just a physical show or a universal and spiritual experience. And in order to answer this question, we must ask ourselves, are we physical beings trying to have a universal and spiritual experience? Or are we spiritual beings having a momentary physical adventure? Purely from a physical point of view, we hope that each individual is strong enough to stand on their own, and by making this bond, creating an even stronger foundation. This is not only in regards to each having their own career and financial resources, it is about the contribution each one brings to the table, and this needs to be equally respected. In many modern marriages, the strength of what we would call the old-fashioned woman, being the keeper of the house, is often not respected. But it is an equal contribution, where maybe one makes the money on the outside and the other keeps the household together. When children would come in the picture, again, we must ask ourselves if these old codes are not very valid. Do we want to raise our children ourselves and give them our life experiences as an inheritance, or is it about shipping them off to others so we can continue with our such-called important lives? Without having heard your entire sacred code of marriage, I can already see how fast things can go wrong in a marriage on many levels and areas. Yes, Jenai, it becomes too obvious, but let me continue with the next, which is about rights or service. Marriage is not about having free rights, in which two people who say that they love each other use each other as trash containers. What do you mean by that, Morai? Do we have the right to constantly dump our load or shortcomings onto the other? This is what I mean with using the other as a trash container. Do we have the right to speak and say whatever we want at any time of the day? And this is the same regarding sexual desires. In general, we behave with much more decency and more respect in our social life and work environment. Wouldn't we first ask the boss if he has time in order to speak to him or her? Wouldn't we not be aware of how we would speak? In a marriage, maybe it would be advisable to first ask for permission to speak and to set times to speak about certain things that need attention. Whatever happens in the physical day-to-day situations are the effects of the foundation and the levels of awareness of the code. The higher the consciousness is of the code, the better the attitude, behaviors, and contribution that will sustain the marriage. Is it about what I want? With some consciousness, we would treat the other how we would want to be treated. This boils down to service. There is always an exchange between two things, or better said, the relationship between two. The car, for instance, serves us in getting to places. What service do we render in return? Maintenance. The house serves us with shelter. How are we going to serve back? In the same way, God, nature, and everything is in our service. And how are we going to serve back? All of this boils down to a level of consciousness. Is it about what we want out of the marriage, or what the code wants from us? Morai, I think they should open schools for people that are getting married. You are right, Jenai. But it is in regards an entire education most people miss in regards to living, because all they learned was related how to make a living. Now let me come to the spiritual foundation of a marriage. The spiritual meaning of a marriage is the uniting of each individual soul with God. The marriage is a sanctuary where this can take place. Saints have never asked us to give up relationships, family, and worldly obligations. The uniting of a soul with God is about losing the ego connected to the physical identification and attachments of the mind, body, and world. There are similarities in the physical marriage. However, the real uniting can only take place on a spiritual level. Jesus used the words that he will come with a sword, meaning to cut our attachments from each other and the world. When we take all the layers away from ourselves, such as the body and the mind, when we take away all the wrappings, all that is left is our essence, which is our soul, God and love. So in order to get to unconditionally accepting and loving ourselves and the other in a marriage, it can only be done when we progress on a spiritual level. Many individuals that step into a marriage have a false picture in their mind, which is about the love story and ending we see in magical fairy tales. I love those stories, Morai, and that's what in my mind as well. We must, however, understand that even most of these stories are metaphysical stories, stories that describe the union of the soul with Kandu God, and which is a perfect marriage, and in which the two live happily ever after. A marriage in the creation, which is created with opposites, constantly changing and bound to time, is a complete different situation. But the spiritual understanding of that union I just spoke about could help those two people being in a physical marriage. It depends on the consciousness of those individuals, and which could be a great help to each other to get to that real and everlasting marriage. This changes somewhat the picture I had in my mind regarding a future partner and marriage. It doesn't have to, especially when we are going to talk more about love. So hear me out. Okay, Morai. We are created and sustained by love. We got here on the currents of love. And we have to experience that love in ourselves, others, and the world. It is by connecting to that love that we can go through life in a decent way. And it is that love that will get us home. Instead of looking at each other as human beings with all our shortcomings, let's look at each other as a spiritual being, a transparent beam of eternal light and love. When we face each other, we can pretend that we are looking in the face of Kandu, God, the Creator. I guarantee you that we will do things differently. The love on a physical level, which we have for each other, will always be challenged, but the love coming from our true self and higher consciousness is forever. This love, which we through listening and looking at fairy tales interpret as physical, is on the spiritual planes. But when we would connect to this everlasting stream of love, it would reflect as well in the physical plane. This brings me to the next very important part of the code and talking about acceptance. One of the most difficult guiding laws to accept is that everything we experience is merely a reflection from within ourselves. We cannot recognize anything on the outside when it would not already be within ourselves. Marriage is the best training mirror regarding who we are inside. Every character inside of us, the ones we like and do not like, will come to the surface in this close relationship. By accepting all the endless characters, the ones we like or dislike, and embracing them, will automatically bring peace by seeing them in our partner. This again can only be accomplished when we stay connected to the deeper layers and levels of consciousness in the code. Accepting each other and accepting everyone and everything as a book we wrote ourselves or attributing it to God is another level of understanding the code. As long as we think that our partner, others and the world can do something to us, or that there is something wrong or missing, we stay victims in our own book of life, rebelling and fighting. We will stay busy demanding change, but forgetting that we can only change ourselves. Everything we experience are guiding messages, trying to guide us back to our soul and our Creator. So, there are two adventures taking place simultaneously. Our worldly adventure with many adventures within, and one of them is a marriage, and our spiritual adventure. A marriage is thus an adventure, and in every adventure there will be challenges, traps, and treasures. A marriage goes through many stages and chapters, and there is always something new to discover. So be careful in building false securities and trying to control each other. Rather step into the void and feel guided by the sacred code. As our intended adventure in the creation was to let Kandu experiencing it through our mind and body, let him experience the marriage through us as well. All things in the adventure are loaned to us for a while, and for that reason nobody can be our possession, and we cannot hold on or control anything. Marriage is an adventure, and by respecting the code and having a strong foundation, we will be able to go in the unknown, the void, the unseen and unexpected. A marriage built on false securities is boring and can easily fall apart. Then this brings me to the next part, because only by true commitment can we be supported by the energy of the universe and Creator. Just living together and not making an official commitment is like keeping a secret escape door open through which we can escape when it becomes too difficult, but also through which the supporting energy leaks. Only by fully committing in the presence of Kandu, the Creator, will we feel this support. This is another great benefit of the sacred code of marriage. There is a symbolic meaning connected to each finger and is further linked to one of the major body energies, each having a different function and purpose. All five represents the five elements of creation. With the thumb, we express verbally or non-verbally our judgment, the Caesar of my will be done, and we even judge God. This is connected to the ether energy. With the index finger, we point to what we love or do not want to come into our heart. This is the energy of air, connected to our physical heart circulation and respiration system. With the middle finger or fire finger, we express our anger coming forth from fear when we are unable to digest situations. The main fire location in the body is in the abdominal area, with all the digestive organs inside. The little or cleaning finger is connected to the energy of earth. The inheritance ring of a father to his son in order for him to continue in the family legacy went around this finger in the past. It is also our nose and ears cleaning tool connected to the body's elimination system and the lower body openings. Now we get to the ring finger, which represents the element of water, and its main location is in the pelvis and within the sacrum, the procreation and immune system, ensuring vitality, lust is the downfall of this energy, and the highest virtue connected is moderation. The marriage ring is about commitment, and commitment can only take place when there is plenty of flexibility and creativity. Then the marriage ring is a symbol of a circle, a sacred sanctuary and center with a protected wall. By acknowledging the higher principles and the sacred code of the marriage, we stay centered in the purpose of that marriage and the real purpose of life, which is something that outlasts our physical momentary adventure. When through marriage we can get into the real fairy tale of uniting of each other's individual soul with Kandu, we have achieved the highest of all achievements. Whew, there is a lot to think about, Morai, but I can now, after listening to you, see why things not only go wrong in a marriage, but in all aspects of life. Hopefully I can learn more about the code and learning to stick to it. Thank you, Morai. You are most welcome, Jenai.